Winning Blueprint presents.
In the L.A.B room. Atlanta Falcons.
Disrespect, lack of respect, insult. When you look up the word disrespect, those are usually the words that you find underneath the word disrespect. To go 13-3, be the number one seed in your conference, host 2 home playoff games, and have the NFC conference come through your stadium, through your building, really dominate all season long, and yet be disrespected. How is that can occur when you're one of the most dominant teams all season long? Maybe it's because you don't blow teams out. Maybe you don't look as dominant as a 13-3 team is supposed to. But last time I checked, all that matters is wins and losses. Whether it's aesthetically pleasing or not doesn't really matter at the end of the day. As long as the left-hand column is filled with W's and the right-hand column has as few L's as possible, you've done your job. Now, it took me a while to really grasp that concept when talking about teams, because as we all know, we love to see dominant football. If you're a good team, show me that you're a good team. And I think for a lot of us, the Atlanta Falcons in the 2012 season didn't show us enough times that they were a dominant team. They didn't exert their will and their force on other teams that were inferior to them. They just let them hang around, and they did enough to win. And that's probably why we didn't give the Atlanta Falcons the just due that they really deserved in this 2012 season. They were disrespected all year long. And on that note, I thank you for joining me here on the L.A.B follow-up for the Atlanta Falcons, the 30th team to select in the upcoming 2013 NFL Draft. Now, I must admit, early on in the season, I was one of those harping and chirping about how the Falcons weren't as good as their record indicated. I was a hater. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to act like, I'm bigger than everyone else, or I'm up on a pedestal and I was on the bandwagon from the start. No, I was a hater, flat out. I said that this team isn't as good as their record. They're just getting by. They're barely winning football games. No one's afraid of the Falcons. And as I continued to say that week after week after week, they kept winning week after week after week. And after a while, after you keep getting hit in the head with victories, you start to wake up. They start to knock sense into you. Victories knock sense into you really fast. That's one thing I learned in the National Football League. You can say all you want and talk about all you want, but when the wins start stacking up and piling up, things start to make a lot more sense. The picture becomes a lot more clearer after wins begin to pile up. And that's what the Falcons did early on this season. The first half of the season, flawless, 8-0. No one else could lay claim to that. And so the Falcons, as much as I wanted to say, hey, this team isn't as good as they may appear, they were winning football games. And you can't dispute winning. You can dispute numbers. You can dispute all the things you want. You can't dispute wins and losses. Either you won or you lost. And the Falcons were winning. And so that's all it's about in the National Football League. Winning, duh, and they were winning. So when I looked at this team, I had to take a step back. And again, as I usually do after a while, after I realized, man, you're wrong on this, I take a step back, I analyze and assess the situation, and I said, this is a really good football team that needs to be given the credit that they deserve. They get it done offensively. It's not always the prettiest on the defensive side of the football, but they do just enough to keep you off balance, turn it over, give it back to that Atlanta Falcons offense, And the rest is history. And so you can say what you want. They were winning football games. And then they finished up the season, the second half, 5-3. So that gave them a mark of 13-3, the best mark in the NFC conference. So they were the number one overall seed in the postseason. And they really had a heck of a season. And I thought that there were times when they were dominant, but much like the Houston Texans, for me, this Atlanta Falcons team just didn't show me that killer instinct. You always want to see out of a really good team that killer instinct. They got you down, they smell blood in the water, and they attack. And they put the clamps down on you, and there's no coming back from that. That's what you want to see out of a dominant 13-3 football team. And that's why a lot of people always talked about the Atlanta Falcons, but said, but. There was always a but with the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are a really good team, but. The Atlanta Falcons could go to the Super Bowl, but. There was always a but. And that but was always pertaining to the fact that the Falcons didn't have that killer instinct. They only had maybe 4 dominant performances in the 2012 season. You think back to the opener against the Chiefs, that was dominant. You look at that Eagles performance, I really was impressed with them coming off that bye against Philadelphia. That was a great showing by that Atlanta Falcons football team. And then you look at that Giants victory late in the season, that was their best performance of the season, hands down, not even up for discussion. They absolutely, thoroughly dominated the Giants in every facet of the game, shutting them out and really putting a damper on the Giants season. They essentially told the Giants, you were the Super Bowl defending champions, not anymore. If you want to go to the Super Bowl, all roads lead to Atlanta. And they really made a profound statement with that thrashing of the Giants late in the season. And that kind of showed me that this team has what it takes. And if you weren't on board before that Giants game, I think that Giants game should have solidified it for you that the Atlanta Falcons were a team to be reckoned with in the NFC. So I woke up. I smelled the coffee after that 8-0 start. I said, look, this team deserves credit. And I started being a crusader for this Atlanta Falcons team because, again, early on, I was a hater. I said, man, my Redskins lost to them, and I said that they were winning a lot of close games. They weren't beating teams like they should have. They could have lost to Carolina. They should have lost to Carolina at home. Cam Newton fumbles. They end up winning that football game after Matt Ryan makes a beautiful last-second drive, taking them down the field and getting that game-winning field goal. They could have lost so many other games. They had that horrible game against the Raiders where Matt Ryan threw about 5 interceptions, but they found a way to win. They had another stinker against Arizona, but they found a way to win. Again, they always found a way to win. It wasn't pretty, and that's why they always had that but attached to them, but they found ways to win, and that's what good teams usually do. They find a way to win. So we find ourselves in the postseason. Falcons make it out of the season, and I thought that their most damaging loss, all 3 of their losses, came within the division. They lost to Carolina, they lost to New Orleans, they lost to Tampa Bay, they lost to every single team in the division one time. But I thought the most damaging of all of those losses was the one at the end of the season. Not because they lost the game, because of how they lost the game. If you're the Falcons, you have nothing to play for. And look, every team takes notice of what happens seasons before. So I will give the Falcons and Mike Smith a little bit of a pass because they were taking notice and really paying attention and taking notes of what happened in Green Bay a season ago. Green Bay rests their starters in Week 17 against Detroit. They don't play them at all. You get the bye week. So essentially, we're talking about 2 weeks of football where you don't play your starters. They don't have a chance to be in sync against live bullets. You go that whole next week training and preparing for the next upcoming game in the postseason. That's another week that you go without playing football against another opponent. So essentially 3 weeks without playing football, meaningful football, if you are the number 1 seed in the playoffs. And Green Bay lost in their first game coming out of the gate because they were out of sync. And the Falcons didn't want to have that same thing happen to them. They didn't want to suffer the same fate. And so Mike Smith decided to play his starters. Bad move because guys got injured. Mainly John Abraham. Look, this team in the 2012 season already had trouble getting to the quarterback. They only had 29 sacks. That is a terrible number. Horrendous. They already had trouble and issues getting to the quarterback. And your best sack getter, John Abraham, gets injured in the season finale, a game that he probably should not have been playing in. So not only do you lose guys that can help you moving forward, you actually lose the game you tried to win and you lost. So I thought it was a damaging loss because not only did you get guys injured, but also you lost a game at home, a place that you hadn't lost all season long. That mystique and that invincibility at home was now gone. You lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at home. Your previous two losses were both on the road. This one was at home. And so now you look at this team and you say, are the Falcons really that team to beat in the NFC? We weren't sure. I still thought that come playoff time, the Georgia Dome was going to be rocking. This offense was tremendous in 2012. You're going to have to come with your A game if you want to beat the Atlanta Falcons at home. I still thought that they had a shot to really make a run at this thing and get to the Super Bowl. So we get to the divisional round of the postseason. And awaiting are the Seattle Seahawks. Fresh off of a win on the road in Wild Card Weekend against the Redskins, Seahawks had the utmost confidence. They trailed 14-0 in the first quarter, roared back, scored 24 unanswered to win that football game. So now they've already set precedents. We can fall behind, but come back and make a run and possibly win the football game. The Seahawks were playing with a lot of confidence. Winners of 7 out of their last 8 in the regular season. That carried over into a win in the postseason. They were ready for the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons came out, though, and they were steamrolling early. I mean, this team was piping hot. And this is what Mike Smith envisioned when he had them play that season finale against Tampa Bay. Having his team keep that flow and that offensive sync and unity together so that when the playoffs began, they could just come out and play it as if it was the regular season and everything was good. And that's exactly what happened. They jumped out to a commanding 20-0 lead in this game. They took a 27-7 lead at the half. The Falcons did not score another point until the end of the football game as the Seattle Seahawks ran off 21 unanswered points to take the lead with less than a minute in the fourth quarter of this football game. I mean, if you're a Falcons fan, you were stunned. But I called my sister, who is a diehard, avid Atlanta Falcons fan, and I told her, you're going to win this game. Okay, I didn't call and tell her that. I wanted to call and tell her that. I picked up the phone. It died. I didn't get to call her. But I was going to call her and tell her they're going to win this game because I had saw something, a chink in the armor of the Seattle Seahawks earlier in the season when they played against Chicago, and they allowed the Bears to drive down 60 yards, 70 yards, get in the field goal range, tie the game up, send it to overtime. Now, the Seahawks eventually prevailed in that game, but the precedence was set there. They can be had at the end of a football game. They play soft coverage. They allow you to eat up chunks of yard and get into field goal range. And that's exactly what they allowed the Falcons to do. Matt Ryan, just as poised, cool, and as calm and collect as you can be. That's why he's called the Natural. That's why he's a.k.a. Matty Ice. He just ice water in his veins, goes down the field, picks them apart, gets in field goal range. Matt Bryant, as he's done all season long, hammers it home. Falcons narrowly escape a game that they were firmly in control of, 30-28, to move on to the NFC Championship game. So you're saying to yourself, woo, you dodged a bullet. Maybe this is the Atlanta Falcons season, because when you're up that big, you blow the lead. Normally, you don't win the football game. But they were able to weather the storm, gather their wits about themselves, go down the field and get a field goal to win the football game. So if you can do that, now you feel like, hey, it's our destiny to win. So they move on to the next week to take on the number 2 seed, the team that many thought before the season started was going to be the representative for the NFC in the Super Bowl in the San Francisco 49ers. And so the 49ers come into town. They're playing really good football. They just had dismantled the Green Bay Packers in the divisional round of the playoffs. And so these two teams were playing really good football. 49ers come out in this game, and they're a little flat. The offense isn't doing the things that it had done to get to this point. They weren't running the football early in this game, and the Falcons took advantage of that. Again, another hot, fast start for this Atlanta Falcons offense. 14 points in the first quarter. Julio Jones had 5 catches for 100 yards in the first quarter. I mean, the Atlanta Falcons were red hot early on in this football game. And just like against Seattle, they cooled off tremendously. Mistakes were made. Matt Ryan fumbles a critical snap later on in the football game. He throws an interception to kill another drive. The Falcons made mistakes that allowed the 49ers to hang around, and eventually come back, take the lead, and seize control of this football game. The Falcons had one last-ditch effort. They drove all the way down the field late in the football game, had an opportunity to get in the end zone. Matt Ryan suffers an injury to his shoulder about 3 or 4 plays previous to their last play of their season offensively, and it really affected him. You could tell he was favoring the shoulder. He was thinking about it. He seemed like a guy who never had dealt with that type of injury, that sort of magnitude of injury. He was really favoring that shoulder. I don't think mentally he was checked in after he hurt his shoulder, because on fourth down, Tony Gonzalez was open. And if it's me, for my money, I know you got Julio Jones. I know you got Roddy White. But for my money, if it's 4th and 5 and I need a catch, I'm going to Tony Gonzalez. Stop him if you can, because even if he's blanketed, Tony Gonzalez will box you out with that big 6'5" frame, extend those long Inspector Gadget arms, clamp down on the football as tight as humanly possible, and he's going to catch the football. So if I'm Matt Ryan, I'm going down with my guns a-blazing, and it's going to Tony Gonzalez. Instead, he forces it into Roddy White, who is bracketed. It's at least 3 or 4 49ers around, not to mention he is being absolutely assaulted by Navarro Bowman. It was pass interference. They didn't call it. You can't cry over spilt milk, because that was a bad decision to throw the football there anyway when Tony Gonzalez was wide open on the slant. So Falcons turn it over on downs. 49ers end up winning the football game. There you have it. 49ers move on to the Super Bowl. Atlanta Falcons go home after having such a tremendous season. So you look at the Falcons in the 2012 season and you say, what happened? Why did they suffer the fate that they did? And what do they need to do moving forward to take that next step, win that NFC Championship game, and move on to the Super Bowl? Looking at the 2012 season, I thought they did a lot of great things, especially offensively. You look at their offense, and there's not another offense in the league like it. No one in comparison to this Atlanta Falcons offense. The reason I say that is because this offense was ranked 8th. And while that's not the best number in the world, their offense in terms of passing was one of the best and most efficient in the National Football League. You don't get much better than what the Falcons bring to the table from their trio of receivers / tight ends. You don't get it any better than Matt Ryan had it. He was spoiled in 2012. He's been spoiled for the last 2 seasons. Roddy White, Julio Jones, and Tony Gonzalez. It doesn't get any better than that as a trio in the National Football League. It just doesn't. And we're talking about over 260 catches for over 3,400 yards and 25 touchdowns. You don't get that type of production from 3 guys. I just gave you the numbers of 3 receivers or 2 receivers and a tight end combined for a season. That's the passing game for most offenses. Some offenses don't even eclipse those numbers. And I'm talking about just 3 players. Staggering. These guys are ultra productive. And you say what you want. Richard Sherman was vocal in saying that Roddy White is a system guy. He's only benefiting because he's a system receiver. Hey, you say what you want to say. I say this guy is ultra productive, and I don't care what system you put him in. Roddy White is a football player, okay? One of 7 receivers in NFL history. Not in the league now, in NFL history, to have over 80-plus grabs, 1,150 yards or more, and at least 6 touchdowns in 5 consecutive seasons. Make it 6 now after 2012. So I don't want to hear about a system guy. And oh, by the way, he lit up in this football game that very corner, Richard Sherman, and got him for a deep bomb for a touchdown. And so Roddy White is a player. Julio Jones, we know what he is. He's a physical specimen. As I like to say, he is part of the new wave of new age wide receivers in the National Football League. Huge, 6'4", 215, big and strong, can jump out of the gym. He can jump out of any stadium, leap up and grab any football from anywhere. He's out of that same mold of a Calvin Johnson, a Demaryius Thomas, this new breed of NFL receiver. That's Julio Jones. He's the poster child for the new breed and new age of NFL receivers. And so you know what you're getting there in Tony Gonzalez, the ageless wonder. A guy that is talking about retirement, but how can you retire when you just had 93 catches for 930 yards and another 8 touchdowns? How can you retire when you can still do it at such a high level? Your production is better than 95% of the tight ends in the National Football League. I can't see Tony walking away, but when you've had enough, you've had enough. And he's been doing this for about 15 seasons now, so I get it. You want to spend time with your family and your body. And look, he's still in great shape. I don't even know if his body is really worn down at all because he takes such good care of his body. But I tell you what, it's a mental grind too, just as much as physical. So if he's worn down to the point where he just doesn't feel like he can dedicate all the things that it takes to put in for an NFL season, then I get it. But man, the production is still there. The athleticism, the ability to go out and get it done week in, week out is still there. It's still at a very high level. I'd hate to see Tony hang it up. I really would. I know the Falcons are lobbying for Tony Gonzalez to come back. And I think he will. Honestly, he kept talking about 95% that he was going to retire. But after coming so close and seeing that you know you can still do it, I think he's going to give it one more go. One more shot at a Super Bowl. If they don't get it done, whether they get as close as they got this season or not, I think he's going to hang it up after that. But I think he's going to give it one more go. I could be wrong. I'm usually wrong about things like this. But I just think he's going to give it one more shot because he was so close. He makes it all the way to the NFC Championship game and can almost taste a Super Bowl championship. And so I think that hunger, that drive, that desire to be a winner, to go out on top, will bring Tony Gonzalez back for one more season. We'll see. But this offense was dynamic. And they had to be because they weren't world beaters on the defensive side of football. And again, I just told you, only 29 sacks. That was 5th worst in the league. They didn't get pressure on the quarterback. That wasn't their forte. That wasn't their expertise. But what they did do was force turnovers. Plus 13 in the turnover differential. That'll win you some ball games. And with your offense being as dynamic and explosive as it is, you get turnovers, hand it back over to that offense, watch them work. You're going to have a lead to play with. And that's what this defense had all season long. And that's probably why they weren't that good. Because they had a lead, they had cushion, they had margin for error, and they made a lot of mistakes in the 2012 season. But they made enough plays defensively to give the football back to their offense and allow them to work, score points, and give them opportunities to win football games. A large part of that was the 20 interceptions that this defense was able to gather over the course of the season, and that was the 4th best in the National Football League. And so they were a team that was able to force you into mistakes. Even though they weren't getting that much pressure on the quarterback, they were able to force you into mistakes because you had to throw the football, because you were down against this Falcons team because this offense was scoring points, and you had to play keep up. Yeah, and you always had to keep pace with the offense of the Atlanta Falcons, and sometimes it got you into trouble, forcing it into areas where you couldn't get it in, and this defense made you pay for it. But looking at this team in the postseason, my real concern with them was something that a lot of people had a concern with them throughout the course of the regular season, that killer instinct. It came back to haunt them against Seattle. They were able to overcome it. It came back to haunt them against San Francisco, and it was their undoing in the 2012 season. So I really think that Dirk Cutter, the offensive coordinator too, is as much to blame as this defense is. As at times, I thought that he didn't call the game the way it should have been. Now, against San Francisco, I don't blame Dirk Cutter for that. I don't blame him at all because it felt like the Falcons made mistakes on the field that had nothing to do with the play call. I thought that Matt Ryan had that fumble that was just careless on his part. And looking at the defense, not watching the ball go into his hands, taking his eye off of it, and then smacking it right over to Aldon Smith, who recovered it easily. You can't have those things happen when you're driving for points. The interception, Roddy White slips coming out of his break, ball goes right to the defender. It's picked off. There's really nothing you can do about that. So that didn't have anything to do with Dirk Cutter. But the Seattle game, I felt like that was on Dirk Cutter. Thought he was way too aggressive at a time where he didn't need to be aggressive. This team was running the football on the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, you look at Jacquizz Rodgers in that game, he was a monster. He was a grown man in that game, running over Earl Thomas and getting a 50, 60-yard gain on that play. They were running the football. Michael Turner was having success. And then they stopped running the football and just took to the air unnecessarily, stopping the clock, playing into the Seattle Seahawks' hands, allowing them to roar back in that game and take the lead and almost coming from behind and winning that game. I thought that was all on Dirk Cutter. I thought that the San Francisco 49ers game, however, was more about the lack of execution on the field by the Atlanta Falcons and less about Dirk Cutter. But I have my questions about Dirk Cutter at times. And so I'm thinking as a coordinator, Dirk Cutter needs to make sure that he's better in 2013. He did his job. Look, I'm not taking anything away from Dirk Cutter. There was a reason why his name was speculated in potentially getting a head coaching gig in the offseason, because he was good at his job in 2012. But make no mistake about it, there were mistakes made in the postseason, and some of them were the fault of Dirk Cutter. Now, looking at this Atlanta Falcons team in the offseason, I think that, of course, is Tony Gonzalez going to be back is one of the biggest questions you have in this offseason. Matt Ryan has already basically healed from the shoulder injury that he sustained against the San Francisco 49ers, so he didn't need surgery. He's fine. So you're good there. No worries. Your biggest offseason question is Tony Gonzalez. Will he be back? You need Tony Gonzalez back. If he does not come back, however, that's an issue that you'll need to address either in free agency, and there'll be some quality tight ends available in free agency. You're looking at this Falcons roster, they need a few pieces. They're a team that could definitely use upgrades in several positions, mainly the defensive line. I think that the 29 sacks speak for itself. I don't really need to tell you that they need defensive end help. You can see it by the lack of numbers for sacks. They need to be more stout against the run, and they need to get after the quarterback. That's why they were ranked 24th in defense, because they didn't get to the quarterback. They didn't stop the run well enough. This team could be run on. This team could be passed on, and they were in 2012, and so they need to address that. So you need to address your defensive line. I think you could use more linebacking help. Right now, Stephen Nicholas, Witherspoon, and Akeem Dent are probably your three starting linebackers. Akeem Dent is often injured. I really want to see what he can do at the middle linebacker position. He needs to stay healthy, however. And you don't have any depth. Mike Peterson has no business being on your roster right now. None whatsoever. You tried to part ways with him, and you had to bring him back just because you didn't have the depth necessary to cut him loose. And so Mike Peterson needs to be allowed to walk away. You need linebacker depth on this football team. So that's an area of need as well. If Tony Gonzalez does not return, tight end is a need. I think that the defense is set, especially in the secondary, after you get past the defensive line and linebacker. Because I think you have one of the better tandems at safety in William Moore and Thomas Deku in the league. And your cornerback situation has been really good, especially after adding Asante Samuel. You're going to lose Brent Grimes to free agency, but he didn't play most of the season anyway, suffering that injury. And so you're good in the secondary. Looking on the offensive side of the football, again, Tony Gonzalez, if he retires, you're going to need a tight end. This offense is predicated on having someone work the middle of the field to soften up the receivers outside and give them the looks that they deserve. And you don't have a guy eating up space in the middle of that field, then the defense is going to start focusing in on those receivers out wide, and this offense will bog down. So you need a tight end. There will be some good tight ends available in free agency, so we'll see what the Falcons decide to do after they find out what Tony Gonzalez is going to do. Hopefully he lets them know something so that they can get something done in this offseason and not wait till the last second after he decides what he's going to do. Also, you look at the running back position. Michael the Burner Turner is running out of gas. And it's not empty, but it's at that quarter line right now. And I tell you what, you can go ahead and remove the burner away from his name now. He's just Michael Turner. He's not outrunning anyone anymore. And you have the Atlanta Falcons to blame for that. because they ran this man into the ground. After they got him from San Diego, they told him, look, we're going to use you and run you to run us out of mediocrity. And that's exactly what they did. They got on his back, saddled him up, and rode him out of mediocrity. But in the process of doing that, they gave him the football 315 times, about 4 straight seasons. Now, he didn't have anything left in the tank. And so now you need a new running back. Jacquizz Rodgers is great, and I think the Falcons know what his value is to this team, but you can't have him be the guy that totes it 25 times a game. I don't think he's built that way. And I tell you what, he has so many different hats on this team, whether it's third down blocking, catching the ball out of the backfield. You want him to be the jack of all trades that you need him to be. And I don't think he can still serve in that capacity if you ask him to tote the rock 23, 25 times a game. I think you need to have someone else do that. Have him be the change of pace, that third down specialist that he's been throughout his career thus far. And so you need a running back, because Michael Turner can't do it anymore. As you can see, the running game for the Falcons suffered tremendously in 2012. They were not a good running team in 2012, but they made up for it more than enough with the passing game. And so you need a running back. So looking at the Falcons' needs in the offseason, defensive line, tight end, linebacker, and running back. Now, if I am the Atlanta Falcons with that 30th overall selection in the first round, I think that it's one of two things, because you can get a running back later on in the draft. You can get a linebacker later on. Those aren't dire needs. If you are the Atlanta Falcons, you need either a tight end. If Tony Gonzalez decides not to come back, you need a tight end. This defensive line, we've already talked about it. 29 sacks speaks for itself. You needed a defensive end yesterday. So to say that you need one now is an understatement. So you need a defensive end with that pick, or a tight end. Whichever one is highest on your board and available, you take it. To me, that's what you do if you're the Atlanta Falcons. But again, when you're picking this late in the draft, you have something that many teams don't. The ability to pick whomever you want, basically taking the best player available, if you so please, because you're a good football team already. And all you're looking to do is stockpile the most talent you humanly possibly can. And that's what they're going to look to do, and that's what I expect the Falcons to do. This team is really good. They're set. They just need a few pieces here and there. Hopefully Tony Gonzalez returns. If you're a Falcons fan, you're praying for that. And if he does, then you'll really just need those other 3 positions that I spoke of. But that'll do it for the Atlanta Falcons and their lab follow-up. I thank you for joining me. Stay tuned, as we'll be talking about the 31st team to select in the 2013 NFL Draft. And look, that's the worst pick to have in the National Football League. That's the worst pick to have in the draft, because that means you fell just short of your ultimate goal of winning the Super Bowl. You fell just short of achieving your dreams. And so that's the worst pick to have. And of course, I'm talking about the San Francisco 49ers. Today is a double header day, so stay tuned, as I'll be right back talking about San Francisco 49ers football. I thank you for joining me here on the Atlanta Falcons Lab Follow-Up. Come right back.
Atlanta Falcons.